Good day. Thank you for receiving us here, this time in your home. As you know, there are different theories of what happened on September the 30th, both on the national and international level. What arguments do you use when saying that it was an attempt of a coup d'etat?
There's no doubt it was an attempted coup. I will support my position with arguments a bit later. In our country, the opposition can say whatever they like. It is believed here that being in the opposition means denying obvious things. They are even ready to argue that a circle has right angles, and if I had died that day, they would have said that I committed suicide. Anyway, day by day, we get more and more evidence that this was an attempt to destabilize the situation. The thing is that classic coup d'etats, at least in Latin America, with troops, overturn of a president and appointment of a new military dictator as president are impossible in the 21st century. There are new ways to disrupt the work of the government. Presumably, a certain part of society, in this case armed people, national police, express their discontent with the new law they haven't even read to the end. The law is a good one. All this has happened because of misleading information. This discontent serves as a basis for intrusion of political groups, of corrupted groups from the police itself, of people violating human rights and resorting to torture. Thus, these groups are taking advantage of the general discontent not to have their salaries raised, but to insult the president, to hold him hostage, to threaten him, and to finally make an assassination attempt. That's clear from video recordings. They were not acting on their own. Their actions were coordinated by political groups. That's what I would like to stress. Those groups stayed in the shadow, waiting for the outcome of this attempted coup d'etat, but the attempt failed. There were a number of coordinated operations, and the evidence shows that these actions had been prepared over 3 weeks in order to create turmoil, which was supposed to last no more than 1, 2, or 3 days. It was joined by the armed forces. Looting broke out, as well as skirmishes and bloodshed. As a result, the government would simply have to stand down. But they could not foresee that I would get back to Quito headquarters, and when they treat me in such an insulting manner, when they keep me hostage, all this unites the country and the police itself, who see that what's going on is far from demands to raise salaries. That's when the coup d'etat failed. I insist. It's obvious that it was an attempted coup, but it had a new format, rather than a classic one. It was manifested by obvious discontent of the people, leading to chaos and destabilizing the work of the government.
In your ardent address that morning, you challenged those who want to kill the president, asking if they are brave enough to do so. What was the threat like at the moment?
I asked a question to the police. The president is sticking his neck out? What are they talking about? According to the current theory, it was discontent expressed due to misunderstanding of a good new law concerning the military and the police. I was going to explain the essence of law my way, but once we arrived, we were met with tear gas and with slogans. Get out, pro-Venezuela communists! They blocked the presidential building and pinned the tires. Therefore, it was evident from the very beginning that it was a political trap, and there was no wish to carry out dialogue. We heard no demands to raise salaries. It was a political scenario. Long live Lucio Gutierrez. This is the country's former president who is behind all this. That's why I opened the window and tried to explain the situation, but they continued interrupting and insulting me. As we knew about the looting and we realized it was a political trap, I said, if you want to kill me, but don't destroy our homeland. They didn't have the guts to do so. Later on, when the coup failed, they did try to kill the president, which can be seen from the recordings and was confirmed by numerous pieces of evidence. The room I stayed in was attacked by gunfire, as well as the presidential car. Anyone can take a look at those shots. There was an order to kill the president, but at that moment, those cowards did not have the guts to kill me.
Some doctors in the hospital where you were treated contradict the information about you being kidnapped. Can you comment on that, please?
You can hear any kind of nonsense in a democratic society, but lately it was proved that the doctors claiming that were not even in the hospital at the time. In other words, I was not there. I left at 11 a.m., prayed somewhere till night, and then I was found. This is ridiculous. That's how they show their zeal to harm and to disprove obvious facts. If you are not kidnapped or kept prisoner, call it whatever you like, why would they need the army to save the president? And why then the military were fired at if the president is not kept prisoner? This is disproval of obvious facts, and this is unlimited human wickedness.
You said that due to a number of weird coincidences, there is an investigation of the opposition members' actions before the 30th of September. What coincidences did you mean? And what are the preliminary results?
For example, in the morning of the 23rd of September, there are recordings proving it. Fidel Arreo, a deputy of Lucio Guterres, who's behind all this, was not alone. The main initiator is the Social Democratic Party. Its members are detained for the time of the investigation, was managing a strike in Quito. Also, a few days before the clashes on the 30th of September, 7 opposition members of the National Assembly made a trip to the United States, where in Washington, they met with the ultra-right who, as we know, financed the opposition group's activity. We do not have proof that they financed the events of September 30th. We do not have proof that they financed the events of September 30th, but we can prove that they financed the opposition's activity. Interests of different people meet here. The tough core of the corrupted police? There are 42,000 people working for the police, and this group counts less than 200. And Ecuadorian political groups who knew that they will not win at the election and who want to defeat us using arms. And also there are foreign groups who are constantly making efforts to destabilize work of progressive governments.
What problems and internal weaknesses, in your opinion, have been shown since the events we are talking about?
It's absolutely clear that even before these events, there were mistakes of the intelligence agency and the government. And it's understandable because when we came into government, our intelligence, as well as police and the military, were financed by the U.S. Embassy. Let us be frank. It's an obvious fact. The U.S. Embassy started controlling then. They appointed heads of police and military departments who underwent a lie detector procedure. I said that we should remove the person who was reporting to the embassy and the CIA instead of the government of his own country. Colonel Pasminio, who met with Gutierrez in Miami, was involved in conspiracy activity and was called the government's enemy. Thus, since the 1st of March of 2008, when Colombia started bombing Ecuador, all those disadvantages of the intelligence service were revealed. And many intelligence departments knew that, and they were in contact with the Colombian groups. But instead of reporting to the government, they acknowledged the U.S. Embassy. So we were to disarm those groups and start controlling the intelligence agency. We were to finance it, appoint the heads of departments, and work out a new law on the State Intelligence Service, but it was adopted only in 2009. That's why, from 2009, we have been reforming the intelligence service system. But all those structures have been decaying, and still there are people who manage to get in there. It's very difficult to reform the system of intelligence, so we are still working on it. It's clear how those problems appeared, but it's a big problem, and we have to pay a lot of attention to that. That was one of the mistakes we faced on the 30th of September. Those were mistakes of Ecuador's intelligence, and the investigation revealed later on that the coup had been prepared 3 weeks in advance. That was daring. Messages were sent via the internet and mobile phones. Everybody knew about the coup and the political supporters, except the government.
When you talk about these extreme right-wing groups that support the opposition on the international arena and try to obstruct the changes that are happening, which groups are you talking about exactly?
I won't mention any names. We know who they are, but I don't want to obstruct the investigation. What I will say, however, is that these new tactics of the North American hawks, the extreme right-wing groups, mainly in the U.S., but also in Latin America, Europe, etc., as they don't have a central government. What I will say, however, is that these new tactics of the North American hawks, the extreme right-wing groups, mainly in the U.S., but also in Latin America, Europe, etc., as they don't have a central government, these new tactics are indirect. They don't try to achieve a direct effect via the foreign policy of a state, but instead use think tanks for conspiracy purposes. How do they do that? They finance conspiracies and work on the inside of a country by means of defamation, fact distortion, and misinformation. We are called populists, authoritarian dictators. Us, the presidents that have run in the elections more often than anyone else, but according to them, since the politically correct candidates don't win, we are the dictators. Isn't that right? They distort facts. They propagate their ideology like science. All of these freedom figures, in other words, if you raise taxes, you are endangering freedom and lowering their freedom level. This is what all the newspapers are saying. The freedom level in Ecuador has decreased. So it's all a conspiracy. Conspiracies are everywhere. It's a new way to work for these ultra-right groups. They no longer have the support of the U.S., so now they are plotting against Obama himself, financing opposition groups and depicting them as independent groups. But what they are spreading is, in fact, their ideology.
Mr. President, you and I talked in Moscow a year ago. Over the course of that interview, you described yourself as a realist who is not afraid of change. Have you become disappointed after the events of September the 30th? What's the difference between the Rafael Correa of 2009 and yourself today?
I would say I'm the same person I was before September 30th, but it was certainly an experience. 5 people were killed, and I can't stop thinking about that. I keep asking myself what I could have done to avoid it. The fact that I was so close to death has left an imprint on me, of course. I'm still worried. Children write to me, asking me to start smiling again. I have to do that. It was obviously a very severe experience, but we know our path wouldn't be paved with roses. We wanted to change our country, but we could not imagine it would come to criminal extremities like it did on September 30th. That makes us even more realistic, but we can't afford to lose hope. We have to keep fighting and keep believing that the country can be changed and that we can do it. It was a heavy blow, of course, but we have to move forward.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with you.